This is a follow-up to a video I made back in June, and you might want to see that if you haven't already, because there I discussed the value of pure harmonies and the fact that in singing or making any kind of harmony, these most simple ratios sound the best, and that's what we naturally converge to. But 12-tone equal temperament has become standardized as a matter of convenience, even though it's musically suboptimum. Just intonation involves a little more complexity, but I figure this being the 21st century and all, maybe we should be able to deal with that. So in that earlier video, I showed how, in principle, all Western music can be implemented in 5-limit just intonation. I also released an album with friends, entirely in just intonation. And I really appreciate the warm response I've gotten to that. Now, I'm of an era when people got into albums, especially concept albums, as opposed to playlists. It's a very different experience. And the questions I've gotten are of the form, how is this actually brought into practice? And whereas the first video was more of an academic exercise and didn't take it down to the code level, I decided to make this a genuine how-to video. And the software I developed, I decided just to give it a user-friendly interface and give it away as freeware, downloadable from GitHub. The link is below. No sign-ups, no ads, no agree-to sheets, it's just free. It has a WAV file output, a spreadsheet output, but its most useful output is the MIDI files that achieve just intonation via MIDI's pitch bend function. So a quick overview here, and then I'll give a brief description and demo of the software program which I've named JICO, Just Intonation Chord Organ. I haven't written a manual for it yet, so this video is pretty much it. But I'm not going to describe every button here. It's all pretty intuitive. I'll try and hit the main points. And there are all kinds of ways to approach just intonation. I don't want to sound dogmatic like this is the only way, but this is the approach I've worked out and it works. And now just intonation is easy to implement. So when I say just intonation makes music sound better, I mean, of course, it has greater consonance. The harmonies are pure. The notes aren't beating against each other. So for music of any degree of complexity, maintaining those pure harmonies denotes incremental tuning tweaks as the music progresses. And the tuning tweaks, they're not global, they're specific to each note. And the tweaks occur at chord changes. And at any chord change, there's not just one solution, but usually several solutions that will maintain just intonation. And I really did go through this in some depth in the last video. And to navigate through those options, we use a hexagonal grid, which is equivalent to Euler's tonnets. He developed back in 1739. There are 3 directions on the grid: major thirds, minor thirds, and fifths. An important point here, there's no real dimension of pitch getting higher or lower. All these notes are in the same octave, from 1 to 2 hertz. So as you move across the 2D grid, it's not like you're moving up or down a scale, but in small increments, the frequencies of all notes shift. So each cell represents a unique note, and chords are represented by clusters of cells. Major triads look like this. Minor triads look like this. And your more complex chords also are clusters of cells, like these. And the clusters string together to form a chord progression. So let's crank up JICO, and a quick reminder, please like, subscribe, and share this video. It's an algorithm thing. So like I said, every cell represents a node, so let me explain the text within the cells. At the top is the note's name, below that is its frequency expressed as an exact fraction. And by the way, in 5-limit just intonation, these values are all products of the first 3 prime numbers, 2, 3, and 5, raised to some integer power. And below that is its frequency expressed as a decimal value. And the little designation at the bottom is that note's equivalent in equal temperament. And if it diverges more than half a semitone, the equal temperament note won't have the same name as the just intonation note. And that's shown here. And this equal temperament note and scent deviation is what's conveyed in MIDI to achieve just intonation in your DAW, your digital audio workstation, or whatever you use to play a MIDI file. And by the way, all the tuning parameters are user configurable in the program's menu. As it's configured here, this A is set to a frequency of 1, and there's a global multiplier, which happens to be set to 440, and the equal temperament reference is A440. So in this configuration, the only note whose frequency is the same in both just intonation and equal temperament is this A right here. You know, whatever you build here, you can export in MIDI, where you have complete control over the instrument selection, the octaves, chord inversion, etc. But the JICO program also has internal tone generation, so you can hear what you're doing, and it's just a basic organ tone. So you start your build by clicking on major and minor triads with the mouse, and then you can go into the menu and modify them to whatever you want. So for major chords, you click on the 12 o'clock position of the root note, and minor chords, you click on the 2 o'clock position. So let's make this a C, A minor, F, and G progression. And the program alternates between the hexagonal grid and the menu. And when you're in the menu, you can just hit return to keep going. Okay, let's hit the G. Or you can edit the chord right there, and or you can enter a number, which will change its beat value from a default of 1 beat. And the bottom of the menu is where all the responses go. So let's make this G 2 beats, and let's edit this G major to a dominant 7th. Okay, so we'll hit E for edit. We want to edit chord number 4, and we want to modify its notes, not the number of beats, and we want to modify it using the text. We'll keep the same root, make further mods, yes, and we'll select number 5, which is a major 3rd, dominant 7. Additional modifiers, no. And at this point, the program's internal logic comes into play. You see it opted for the 7th note, an F here, rather than up here, connected to the cluster, where it would have been a little more harmonically close. And it did that because this F is the root of the previous chord. So it didn't want to change the frequency of a note that's continuing from one chord to the next. And this is exactly what it should do, but there's always enough flexibility in the program to work around its internal logic, if you want to. So let's hear our just intonation, C, A minor, F, and G, 7th, pop music's ubiquitous 4-chord progression. You're going to find out that for a lot of music, the pitch drift doesn't go very far, and the audible effect of dynamic tuning really isn't very pronounced, unless you want it to be. And we'll get into that because 12-tone equal temperament has 12 unique frequencies and octaves, and that's it. On the other hand, music rendered in just intonation with dynamic tuning can have hundreds of unique frequencies. It can be unbounded. It can also feel unmoored, essentially keyless. Let me just call up something a little more interesting. You know, we don't know exactly what temperament Herr Beethoven used for the 9th, but he used some type of well temperament, a lot more consonant than equal temperament. These chords are supposed to be pure and strong, not having the random quivering of equal temperament. So let's make a MIDI file. I'll just hit the M. And there are a few options for MIDI. It would nominally create as many MIDI tracks as the maximum number of notes of any one chord. And these are all pretty simple chords, so that number turns out to be 4. But the default ping pong option here will double that number, and its purpose is to eliminate any portamento effects as the pitch bend values change. And you can see how that works when we bring it into the DAW. And I'm going to lower this 1 octave. 480 resolution is fine. There's a whole list of MIDI instruments. I'm going to select church organ, number 20. And that can be overridden, by the way, in the DAW. And I'll call this Beethoven.mid. And while I'm at it, let me also say Beethoven is a WAV file. Now let's bring up Cubase and drop the MIDI file in, and voila. We'll set the tempo and we're good to go. And down here you can see the pitch bend data. And if you want to, and if your DAW displays the raw data, you can verify that these values correspond to the cent deviation shown on the hex diagram. Not to get too technical here, but MIDI allocates 14 bits for pitch bend. And per general MIDI level 1 spec, JICO interprets that numeric range, which is 0 to 16,383, as corresponding plus or minus 2 semitones. The bottom line is you should verify that whatever you drop this into, whether that's Cubase or some other DAW, that it interprets pitch bend data as spanning plus or minus 2 semitones. On some DAWs, that may be something you set. And as a quick double check, you can always drop the WAV file into the DAW and play them both together. And if they're not exactly in tune with each other, it'll be obvious. So let's hear this in MIDI. So in what we've looked at so far, the effect of pitch drift has been very subtle. But if you want to make it unsubtle, you can do what I did here on Day in the Sun on the CD. Or you can just let it expand. You don't have to keep the chords all bunched together or always return or backtrack to the same set of frequencies. As an example, take the chord progression of House of the Rising Sun. Let's do this in real time. Okay. And that should be a 7th chord. Okay, so the rest of the verse essentially repeats the same thing. And you can see it's pretty well contained. But alternatively, you can expand it a little bit. And let me just load that. And you can see that every time the progression hits this A minor chord, it doesn't necessarily repeat the same set of frequencies. And we can expand this even further in the second verse using cut and paste. I'll hit C for cut and paste. Starting chord is 1, the stop chord is 14, no, don't erase. Paste after chord 14, number of rows to transpose. After I paste this, I want this A to be where this A is. So that looks like about up 6 rows and over 5 columns. Delete the original block of chords, no. And this overshoots the grid. No worry, we can expand the grid to whatever we want, almost. Type G for grid. Let's change it to 19. Okay, so let's hear it. And looking at this first A, it's 43 cents below equal temperament, and the A toward the end is 43 cents above equal temperament. So the whole sequence shifts almost a semitone, but it does it very smoothly and naturally. And it doesn't have to stop there. I mean, it can just keep going. And that's what I mean by essentially keyless. Now, I focused here on chords, but what about the melody line and the non-chord notes? Well, to see what those frequencies are, you can always just look at the grid. In the neighborhood of any note or chord, they're all the notes of the chromatic scale. Or you can just momentarily change your chord to include an otherwise non-chord note. You can always add a 6th, a 7th, 9th, 11th, 13th. But if you really want, you can create a melody of single notes. And the program really wasn't designed with that in mind. But it's accomplished in the additional modifiers section, where you can remove both the 3rd and the 5th of your triad. And that just leaves you with a root. So in this example, you see all the chords with the designation ZV. That means no 3rd and no 5th. They're just single notes. So the melody line is on the left and the chords are on the right. The two MIDI files were merged in the DAW, and the octaves of some notes and the lengths of some notes were tweaked a little bit in the DAW. So let's hear it. So that's a very harmonious, whiter shade of pale in Just Intonation. I always love that song. All right, so those are the key points, and the intent of this free program is to promote new music in Just Intonation. I just hit the basics here, but there's lots of unusual things you can do with this program. For example, let me pull this up. And I'll leave it to you to find out how that sounds. Peace.